guys, what's up? And welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about a topic that is severely disturbing to me, very uncomfortable, just something that seems a little too horror movie for me. And I love the genre, but truly not in real life. But then again, why are you here if not to be comforted by all the good news I consistently talk about on this channel? Anyway, we're gonna be talking about pronatalism. So buckle the fuck up. So definitions out of the way. Pronatalism. So that's the policy or practice of encouraging people to have children, the promotion of childbearing. And then a second definition says, natalism is a belief that promotes the reproduction of human life. The term, as it relates to the belief itself, comes from the French word for birth rate, natalité. Natalism promotes childbearing and parenthood as desirable for social reasons and to ensure the continuance of humanity. So right off the bat, in and of itself, this doesn't sound scary, crazy, or anything like that. I think that a lot of people in my age range, I'm 29, have at some point been questioned, pressured, plenty of things, at least asked about children. That being said, this whole discussion is about to become real fucking weird, so here we go. I will be linking the whole article down below because it is relatively lengthy and I only chose portions that I think display the important bits that you need to know in order to come to an initial conclusion. Billionaires like Elon Musk want to save civilization by having tons of genetically superior kids inside the movement to take, quote, control of human evolution. Sitting in their toy-filled room on a sunny September afternoon, Simone and Malcolm Collins were forced to compete with the whales of two toddlers as they mapped out their plans for humankind. I do not think humanity is in a great situation right now, and I think if somebody doesn't fix the problem, we could be gone, Malcolm half shouted as he pushed his sniffling 18-month-old Torsten back and forth in a child-sized Tonka truck. Along with his 3-year-old brother, Octavian, and his newborn sister, Titan Invictus, Torsten has unwittingly joined an audacious experiment. According to his parents' calculations, as long as each of their descendants can commit to having at least 8 children for just 11 generations, the Collins bloodline will eventually outnumber the current human population. If they succeed, Malcolm continued, we could set the future of our species. Now, I wish there were people called fucking Torsten, Titan, whatever the hell else, because I wouldn't have gotten bullied because my name was already considered weird. A lot of these names really scream deep sea creature to me, but let's just keep going. Malcolm, 36, and his wife Simone, 35, are pronatalists, part of a quiet but growing movement taking hold in wealthy tech and venture capitalist circles. People like the Collinses fear that falling birth rates in certain developed countries like the United States and most of Europe will lead to the extinction of cultures, the breakdown of economies, and ultimately the collapse of civilization. And here I was thinking I was depressing, and that Joe Rogan and the billionaire venture capitalist Mark Andreessen bantered about on the Joe Rogan Experience. It's also alarmingly been used by some to justify white supremacy around the world, from the tiki torch carrying marchers in Charlottesville, Virginia, chanting, "You will not replace us," to the mosque shooter in Christchurch, New Zealand, who opened his 2019 manifesto, "It's the birth rates, it's the birth rates, it's the birth rates." The Nazi thing is going to come up a few times potentially, and that's because as we keep going in this narrative, as we keep finding out more about all of this, there is a very familiar sounding narrative. That narrative to me does scream late 1930s, World War II, superior species kind of narrative. Make of that what you will, just keep it in mind, see if you see what I'm seeing here. The whole superior species deciding who gets to live or not based on what you think they're going to be able to do in their lives when you're just looking at genes. There are so many things that set off red flags. Google searches for population collapse spiked this summer after Musk continued to raise the issue in response to insiders' report that he'd fathered twins with one of his employees. According to the United Nations, more than a quarter of the world's countries now have pronatalist policies, including infertility treatment benefits and baby bonus cash incentives. Meanwhile, a spate of new assisted reproductive technology startups are attracting big-name investors such as Peter Thiel and Steve Jurvetson, fueling a global fertility service market that research and markets projects will reach $78.2 billion by 2025. So I also want to underline one thing. This whole thing of population collapse to me sounds like alarmism in order to get people to have 25 children in order to avoid this and then also select those 25 children. I really do think that this is one of those cases where the intention is really what concerns me. Because if you are one of those people who wants a big family, because you like the idea of it, because you like creating a support system, all of those things, that is entirely fine. Once we cross into the territory of wanting a big family for some kind of survival of the species, doomsday kind of thing, I start to get concerned because it seems like we're talking about products, first of all, not actual human beings. And it seems like we're talking about how to create these products in masses. Not having a child because you want to have a child and you want to have a family, but rather for this quote unquote greater goal. I think having one child is probably hard enough. Having 13, putting even aside finances, which I think were the first thing that came to mind for me. How is it that you're going to be able to work, have those children, take care of those children's needs from emotional to psychological to intellectual to every just thing that encompasses being a human being? I don't know how you're going to make all of that work, which is really one of the key factors that worries me, is that the quality of life of these kids is going to be fucking horrific because, again, the emphasis is going to be on how many kids, not how happy the kids that we have are. Inside, Simone, statuesque, even 1 month shy of her delivery date, wore her pregnancy uniform of a crisp white Oxford shirt, a long black skirt, Doc Martens, and red lipstick, ignoring she would later tell me her mother-in-law's plea to not dress like a fucking pilgrim in front of the press. Their wardrobes, Simone told me later, are meticulously curated to project the kind of gravitas their work requires. Beneath their thick, black-rimmed glasses, hers round, his rectangular, the couples look, as they would put it, biologically young. Yeah, the whole uniform thing also creeps me out. It's completely surface level, just very superficial of me, I understand, but putting it all together, the vibe here, This is the part in the horror movie where you start getting some creepy music, where you start feeling and seeing the uncanny. This is where shit starts happening, I'm telling you. Together they write books and work in the VC and private equity worlds. Simone has previously served as managing director for Dialogue, the Secretive Retreat co-founded by Thiel. While they relate to the anti-institutional wing of the Republican Party, they're wary of affiliating with what they call the crazy conservatives. Above all, they are focused on branding pronatalism as hip, socially acceptable, and welcoming, especially to certain people. Last year, they co-founded the nonprofit initiative Pronatalist.org. Elites have used lineage to consolidate money and power for most of human history, but as couples in the developed world are increasingly putting off parenthood until later in life, or abandoning it altogether, people like the Collinses are looking for hacks to make large families feasible in a modern secular society. They both said they were warned by friends not to talk to me. After all, a political minefield awaits for anyone who wanders into this space. The last major figure to be associated with pronatalism was Jeffrey Epstein, who schemed to impregnate 20 women at a time on his New Mexico ranch. Genetic screening and the underlying assumption that some humans are born better than others often invites comparisons to Nazi eugenic experiments. And then there's the fact that our primary cultural reference point for a pronatalist society is the brutally misogynist world of The Handmaid's Tale. The Collinses, who call themselves ruthless pragmatists, consider the inevitable backlash a small price to pay. We're frustrated that one of the inherent points of this culture is that people are super private within it, Simone said. They not only hope their transparency will encourage other members of the upper class to have more children, they want to build a culture and economy around the high birth rate lifestyle. The payoff won't be immediate, Simone said, but she believes if that small circle puts the right plans in place, their successors will become the new dominant leading classes in the world. There's a lot here that I find distinctly alarming and extremely reminiscent, like I said prior, to Nazi ideology in terms of superior species who deserves to live, who deserves a shot, who deserves generally. That's also what makes this even more concerning to me. It's not only this telling people of having as many children as they can, but it's neglecting the fact that the quality of life is important, A, but B, also instituting this mindset of which children are worthy is also alarming. Now, obviously, some of this already exists. There already are screenings for illnesses, so on and so forth. But if your entire focus is to create this superior species, where are we going to stop with deciding who is or isn't worthy? Is a child that might have some completely minor condition going to be put in danger now because of this minor condition, because they're not completely genetically quote unquote perfect, depending on whatever that means to this particular group of people? And as much as I understand that that is a slippery slope argument, we have to ask the question, because in a life and death situation, which these all are, we can't just say, oh, we'll see what's going to happen. While pronatalism is often associated with religious extremism, the version now trending in the community has more in common with dystopian sci-fi. The Collinses, who identify as secular Calvinists, are particularly drawn to the tenet of predestination, which suggests that certain people are chosen to be superior on Earth and that free will is an illusion. Does this not sound late 1930s to you? They believe pronatalism is a natural extension of the philosophical movement sweeping tech hubs like the Silicon Hills of Austin, Texas. Our conversations frequently return to transhumanism, efforts to merge human and machine capabilities to create superior beings, long-termism, a philosophy that argues the true cost of human extinction wouldn't be the death of billions today, but the preemptive loss of trillions or more unborn future people, and effective altruism, or EA, a philanthropic system currently focused on preventing artificial intelligence from wiping out the human population. What these movements all have in common is a fixation on the future, and as that future starts to look more and more apocalyptic to some of the world's wealthiest people, the idea of pronatalism starts to look more heroic. It's a proposition uniquely suited to Silicon Valley's brand of hubris. If humanity is on the brink and they alone can save us, then they owe it to society to replicate themselves as many times as possible. Meanwhile, the Collinses said a mutual friend had been encouraging them to fly to Austin to meet with Grimes, who is the mother of two of Musk's children. Grimes, who follows about 1,470 people on Twitter, followed the Collinses while this piece was being reported. It makes sense considering that Musk, who has fathered 10 known children with 3 women, is the tech world's highest profile pronatalist, albeit unofficially. He has been open about his obsession with Genghis Khan, the 13th century Mongol ruler, whose DNA can still be traced to a significant portion of the human population. One person who has worked directly with Musk and who spoke on the condition of anonymity for this article recalled Musk expressing his interest as early as 2005 in populating the world with his offspring. Musk has increasingly used his public platform to advocate the cause, tweeting dozens of times in the past 2 years about the threat of population decline. If the alarming collapse in birth rate continues, civilization will indeed die with a whimper in adult diapers, he tweeted in January. So as you can see, this is not alarmist at all. These worries tend to focus on one class of people in particular, which pronatalists use various euphemisms to express. In August, Elon's father told me that he was worried about low birth rates in what he called, quote, productive nations. The Collinses call it, quote, cosmopolitan society. Elon Musk himself has tweeted about the movie Idiocracy, in which the intelligent elite stop procreating, allowing the unintelligent to populate the earth. Contrary to what many think, the richer someone is, the fewer kids they have. I am a rare exception, he wrote in another tweet this past May. Most people I know have 0 or 1 kid. Musk was echoing an argument made by Nick Bostrom, one of the founding fathers of long-termism, who wrote that he worried declining fertility among intellectually talented individuals could lead to the demise of, quote, advanced civilized society. Emil P. Torres, a former long-termist philosopher who has become one of the movement's most outspoken critics, put it more bluntly. The long-termist view itself implies that really, people in rich countries matter more. A source who worked closely with Musk for several years described this thinking as core to the billionaire's pronatalist ideology. He's very serious about the idea that your wealth is directly linked to your IQ, he said. The source who spoke on the condition of anonymity for this article also said Musk urged all the rich men he knew to have as many children as possible. See, now this is where I'm saying this is completely irresponsible. A lot of the people who would be having all these children, you can't really convince me that every single one of them would go and get every single group of cells tested before the child is born to see whether the child is worthy of life according to them. A lot of these kids that would inevitably happen could very well be quote unquote inferior compared to what these people are aiming for in the first place. Realistically, also, how quickly would this lead to overpopulation, which would then effectively end up in a decline of quality of life, in a decline of services that are necessary for people, healthcare specifically. There's just so much that can go wrong with this mass production of babies, which is really what we're talking about here. Musk's ties to the EA and long-termist communities have been gradually revealed in recent months. In September, text logs released as part of Musk's legal battle with Twitter showed conversation between Musk and the prominent long-termist William MacAskill, who works at Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute, where Musk is a major donor. In the messages, MacAskill offered to introduce Musk to Sam Bankman-Fried, a now disgraced cryptocurrency entrepreneur who has donated millions of dollars to long-termist organizations. Simone and Malcolm took their data export to a company called Self-Decode, which typically runs tests on adult DNA samples to analyze what the Collinses call the fun stuff. Sitting on the couch, Simone pulled up a spreadsheet filled with red and green numbers. Each row represented one of the embryos from the 6th batch, and the columns a variety of relative risk factors from obesity to heart disease to headaches. The relative part means these scores can only compare each embryo's risk to that of the other individuals with different genetic constitutions, as opposed to, quote, absolute risk scores. The Collins' top priority was one of the most disputed categories, what they called mental performance adjacent traits, including stress, chronically low mood, brain fog, mood swings, fatigue, anxiety, and ADHD. The tests they performed also provided a risk score for autism, a diagnosis Simone herself has received, which they decided to not take into account. Simone compared her autism to a fine-tuned race car. Even if she struggles with certain real-world situations, she said, if I'm on the track and I have my pit crew and I have the perfect fuel, she can dramatically outcompete other people, Malcolm said, finishing her sentence. Now, this was really a point of contention for me because there is absolutely nothing wrong with having autism, but a lot of the narrative that these two and the other pronatalists seem to be pushing is a narrative that there is something wrong because effectively they don't want these people to be part of society if they can avoid it. And the hypocrisy comes in when the people who are advocating it have said thing. They might even have anxiety or other things we don't know about. Which again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Yes, you struggle if you have anxiety, you struggle if you have other things as well, but that shouldn't immediately mean that your life is less valuable than that of others. So the fact that Simone herself's autism is being, I guess, belittled in its own way in the sense of they're kind of brushing that under the rug, but then when it comes to picking who deserves to live, that's not going to be brushed under the rug. It's like, you wouldn't have given you a shot. So here's an interesting part. It's funny that people are so afraid of being accused of Nazism when they're just improving their own embryos, Simone added, after noting that her Jewish grandmother escaped Nazi-occupied France. I'm not eliminating people, I'm eliminating from my own genetic pool, but these are all only Malcolm and me. Now, the fact that the whole Nazi thing has been brought up a few times, and this isn't even the whole article, to me says something. I don't know how you can continue to say, oh yeah, it's actually not that at all, it's actually completely different. And also, I have to say, it makes me really uncomfortable that Simone says people are afraid of being accused of Nazism. I mean, I'm sorry, why would you not be afraid of that? Of all the things that have happened in relatively recent history, one of the worst things that has happened, you want to be compared to the villain in that story? That's okay with you? A lot of people assume that pronatalists want to ban abortion, but nearly half of the pronatalist supporters interviewed for this article identified themselves as pro-choice. In fact, IVF, which inevitably results in the destruction of fertilized embryos, could be under threat in a strict anti-abortion society. The Collinses don't expect or even want anyone in low birth rate countries to suddenly start having 7 or more children. Instead, they see themselves as part of an elite subset of people responsible for growing their broods to offset all the Americans who will choose not to. I think we've all noticed the very recurring theme here of the select few or the elite or the quote-unquote chosen ones, which I think says a lot in and of itself. Now, I do think it's necessary to have the discussion that is uncomfortable but true, that if you're going to decide to have children and plan to have children, most people would agree that you want to plan for a time to have children when you have the money, when you physically can have children, when you physically can take care of the children, when you are in your own optimal situation to have children. I think that goes for pretty much anything in life. If you can be prepared to the utmost level, you want to be, right? That just makes sense. And that also makes sense not just for you, but for the quality of life of your own child. This, on the other hand, feels a little bit different because, again, it's like we're talking about a product. Kind of like, hey, do I have room on this shelf for an extra plant? Oh, I don't? Well, I'm just gonna put this plant on the floor and it'll be fine even if it doesn't get watered and it doesn't get any light. If you have that many children, I fear some of them are gonna end up being that plant who gets no sunlight and no water. This is all a little too dystopian for me. During our initial tour of the farmhouse, Simone pointed out one of its many peculiarities, the toilet tucked away in the corner of her office where she muted herself during virtual meetings to secretly throw up during bouts of morning sickness. The Collinses said that some potential investors backed out of their search fund when they found out about their plans to have children. Determined to prove them wrong, she said she even took calls during labor. She hates when people say you can't have it all, Malcolm told me. I asked the couple whether they really believe their seemingly boundless energy was feasible for high birth rate parents on a wide scale. I think it's a mindset thing, answered Simone, who has no plans to stop working as she grows her family, though she does intend to outsource a significant amount of childcare to both paid professionals and communal child rearing strategies. Once pronatalists reach critical mass, the Collinses hope, they can begin to shape society around their needs. Now, I definitely don't think that being a single parent, being two parents that both work means that you can't have children. Obviously, I'm the child of a single parent, so it'd be ridiculous if I thought that of all people. That being said, I think there is such a thing as being in a difficult situation and overcoming that difficult situation as being a single parent can be. And then it's another thing to choose to put yourself in an actively difficult situation where you're not only putting your own health potentially on the line, but the well-being of other people like your children. This whole thing of quote unquote outsourcing the care of your child, it's one thing to have a kid and have the kid have babysitters or be looked after by families, so on and so forth. If you have a bunch of kids that you're not spending time with, that you're not really there for, that are basically products that are being shaped in order to be the quote unquote perfect human being, I don't even know if I count that as parenthood anymore. Dude, like, are you gonna see your parents? Are you gonna meet once a week for a board meeting? Like, this feels too impersonal, which almost sounds ridiculous to say that something's impersonal when it's your own family. If you want to read the whole article, I'll link it down below. Truly, this entire thing I find really jaw-dropping in the worst way possible, and I really think that this type of rhetoric is extremely oversimplified, right? Because like I said, when we talk about this, we need to keep into account finances, health, but also mental health, the quality of life. All of these things just don't really seem to be factored in entirely. And just saying, oh yeah, we're aware, you know, things might be difficult, or we're aware we're gonna need help and outsourcing, doesn't mean that you're actually prepared to do the thing. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.